Yoka and Ando are still coming. Should I start or wait for Yoka and Ando?
I don't know. You're the boss.
Oh, not guilty. I guess I'll begin. I'm going to attempt to talk about the Diamond Sutra. I didn't want to talk about this book, but or sutra, but I will anyway. I'm not sure how to talk about it. It's extremely profound and mm, the translation I'm working from is by Red Pine. We've all seen that book. I haven't read other translations of it yet. I've read this one a few times. One thing that I do as a student of Sokuzan is he'll suggest something and then I don't take that suggestion. I just do something else. So I'm going to attempt to do something he suggested, but I think I have to look it up because I'm blocking it out unintentionally. um, yeah. How does that show up as emptiness of self, emptiness of other? Um, so in the sutra, just the basic framework is the Buddha is there, and one of his students, Subhuti, is there, and Subhuti is asking questions. And Subhuti has some sort of understanding of emptiness. It's not complete. It's often talked about in the sutra as a Shravaka understanding of emptiness, which is still would be pretty amazing to realize that. And there's a formula that occurs throughout the sutra that I think is quite powerful. It doesn't make any sense conceptually, particularly, but working with that formula, I feel is something one could do on one's own, especially if you spend some time with the sutra and talking with your teacher. And which reminds me that this tradition is a non-theistic tradition, and I think that's sometimes misunderstood as meaning that we're not praying to God, um, which is true. But the other part is that I feel is overlooked is that there's no savior. So we talk about this in book studies sometimes where we're always looking for that next little thing, kind of the second noble truth where, this is okay, but I would like a piece of chocolate that would really make my day, or, you know, um, lots of things we look to as a savior so we don't have to be with what is right here. So non-theism. This formula that occurs throughout the sutra is if you pick something, um, like a tree, it just basically says a tree is not a tree, therefore it is a tree. So what the hell does that mean? Um, my way of maybe talking about that would be to say that you need something to see that there's nothing. You need, if there was just, if there was no content, there wouldn't be anything to point to the awareness or the emptiness of the content. That probably also doesn't make any sense. Um, sorry. But if you don't understand the Diamond Sutra after this talk, that's a good sign. So I'm not here to really explain it. Um, so I guess what comes up, I've been studying the sutra a lot the last few days, just of my own inspiration. And Sokuzan asked me to talk, and so we decided I would talk about this. And the idea of no self and no other is recurrent through this sutra. It's extremely powerful. I wish I could just read it to you instead of me talk about it. And maybe I should. Maybe I should just chant it right now. It takes about 40 minutes. The Buddha said the best way to explain the sutra is silence. So I'm not doing either one of those, but to look at what does it mean for there to be no self on this side? And it's said that this is where we realize no self, and then we realize no other. So if you look at, if you just look at who you think you are, do you find anything? I often can't find who I think I am or the self necessarily. And it will say not finding is finding. However, there's attachment to the body and pain. So I'm finding attachment. So is that the self? If your whole self is just an attachment to the body, that doesn't really add up from what I can see. Aspects of my personality could be said to be a self, but that's also kind of partial and it changes. Um, someone says your name, someone says Choku Dawa. Well, where'd that name come from? My teacher. My other name, Eric, came from my parents. I also have several other names, some of them not very nice. And then what came before all of that to make this person that you can see here? There's a body, there's sounds, there's hands moving. But we have to do this ourselves. That's the non-theistic part. Even the most ultimate teaching is just a teaching, and it points to something beyond itself. That's something pointed out in the Diamond Sutra as well. The Buddha takes Subhuti through different assumptions that he and the other monks have, and shows that it's not really the case. Of course, we don't always know we have an assumption, if ever. There's one aspect that came up today and I can't find it again. There's something about needing content so that you can see that there's something aware of the content. And so bringing that into looking at a self, we're not separate from Buddha, yet we cover up. We have little things we do that we don't notice. And my experience is someone like Sokuzan, my teacher, has pointed out a cover up. And it's like I've always known it's there, yet there is still some kind of identity clinging to it. And it makes me wonder if the only thing we're ever going to find is just attachment. Um, it seems that that comes up over and over in the Diamond Sutra as well, that there's not a problem with anything particularly. It comes down to the attachment to whatever is being perceived or cognized. And so yeah, so let's just not do that, right? Pretty simple. But there's ways in which that is covered up, which is also dependently arisen. So it's not as personal as we think it is, yet it can feel that way. So maybe at this point, you can help me practice some questions. The first one is always Shodo. Thank you, Shodo.
Sort of bowing. How is it that it can be said that the whole teaching is in that first verse where where the Buddha just sits down and looks at what's in front of him? Um,
Yeah, Shodo's referring to in the commentary and other translations also. The very first chapter just talks about the Buddha going out to beg for his food with his bowl and his robes. He comes back to his hut, puts them away. I believe he washes his feet, and then he sits on a seat. And then everyone gathers and he teaches. But it's said that the whole sutra is in that first description. And that didn't make sense to me at all when I first read that. I don't know that it still makes any sense yet. But there's something about him not speaking and just doing, he's just being the teaching. In particular, the point where he's doing a daily activity of basic relative survival. And when that is completed, he's seated and he places his awareness on what's before him, is how it's said. Paraphrasing. So I don't know, but I get a sense of he's not chit-chatting. There's not like this description of him talking to his friends and hanging out with his buddies and doing all kinds of things that you might see in our modern culture or even back then. It's very simple. I don't know. Can you do anything that simple? I guess that's kind of what comes up is it brings awareness around how you do things and what you're doing them for. So I also get a sense that he's begging for food, he's eating food, he's wearing robes, he's doing all of that in in order to sit down and look at what's before him, but he's also not separate from all of the other monks who are present. So I don't really know, but that's kind of what comes up for me anymore around that.
Bowing, just wondering how it might be like really profound that he's turning his attention or his awareness towards what's in front of him. It seems like that could be a rare thing because I don't know that I ever really looking at what's in front of me. Is it as simple as something like that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I don't really know how to talk about that. So the way you're asking that question helps. Even today at work, I I'm there for 8 or 9 hours, and um, I want to meditate, but it's not really appropriate, and it could look kind of weird if I'm just sitting completely still, looking at the desk in front of me. But I did that anyway a little bit, at the risk of looking weird. But there is a strong sense of contrast if you're doing that out of a context of Zendo or something. It's like the ultimate meditation instruction because he's just doing what he needs to do, and then he sits down and he just looks at what's in front of him. There's almost no instruction, so it's like you miss it. But in that, I feel is why it's so profound too. Pretty boring to ego, I would say as well. That first chapter is so boring to ego that um, you're just like, okay, we got the story started, and let's get to the teachings here. But you go back to it over and over throughout the sutra and unpack it more. So in a way, for me, it also becomes kind of a seed syllable of like if you start to understand that the whole sutra is in that first chapter, you can just flash on that, and the whole sutra can kind of fill you up if you're really familiar with it. So I'm not quite there yet, but I'm inspired to keep studying the sutra because of the way it's affecting this body mind. Sokuzan.
So in the Prajna Paramita literature, which is a 2,000 years, I guess, back somewhere in that area, the some parts, some forms are very long, some are shorter. Two of the shorter, more well-known ones are the Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra. And the Heart Sutra is sometimes referred to as the heart of wisdom, the heart of perfect wisdom. The Diamond Sutra is sometimes called the Diamond Cutter. Could you say, if you know about that, if you have some idea about why it would be referred to as the Diamond Cutter?
From what I've read, from what I understand, there's some translators wonder if it's the sutra that is so powerful it can cut through diamonds, or if it's the diamond that can cut through anything. And Red Pine takes it more toward the diamond being a symbol of prajna paramita, and that it can cut through anything. So it's not necessarily a thing. Prajna isn't like a thing that you can find, but it's symbolized by the diamond. And in here, it also talks about it as uh, Vajra, which is a word for indestructible, or sometimes thunderbolt. So it even kind of leans into that direction. So prajna, how do you talk about prajna in front of Prajna Mountain? I guess my best description of that would be you don't abide anywhere. You can't find anything. Anything that arises is seen through or seen as it is. Or how do you talk about that with language? No position. Is there any more around that, Sokuzan?
Well, Divine, I'm curious how you would view Sokuzan's behavior and actions as a teaching in light of the Diamond Sutra.
I think it was Monday night, as it is. I had been reading the sutra that day and the night before, and he said two things in as it is that evening that I felt like he had been right. Were you reading the Diamond Sutra that day? Okay, because two of the things he said were directly from it, I felt. If I can remember them. One was I'm gonna forget one of them. The one was though that nothing has ever begun. Buddha said that. He says it in the Diamond Sutra, and I think other sutras. I just can't quite remember. But then I can't remember the other thing you said.
I think that's it. Can't remember it.
Yeah. Lack of memory.
Can't remember what hasn't begun, can you?
Oh, yeah. That's
Michelle? I mean, what was your name again?
Yunkai.
Oh, is it something like a cloud, generous cloud? That's right. Cloud of generosity. Thank you. Did I name you? So, but like you said, can't remember.
Oh, Divine, so Sokuzan asked you to talk about emptiness. And so I was wondering if we observe our teacher, observe the actions and behavior, not just the teachings.
Mhm.
What does, how can we see emptiness?
Did he ask me to talk about emptiness?
Something about that I don't remember.
I don't remember that.
Emptiness of self, emptiness of other as it relates to the
Yeah,
Diamond
right.
Sutra.
See, I already forgot.
Yeah, remember that.
Okay, so now I forgot your question. I'm a little tired. Could you say it?
Yeah, I'm
Please.
just looking at if if Sokuzan's asking you to talk about emptiness. And the Diamond Sutra, emptiness of self, emptiness of other, speaks to that and opens up with basically observing the behavior of the Buddha.
Hmm.
How do we observe Sokuzan's behavior, and is there anything there that helps us see, understand, grok emptiness of self, emptiness of other?
Yeah, that brings me back to non-theism over and over. That you have to do it. Like it's not something he's doing. Maybe I'm missing that, but the way it looks to me is if I just saw Sokuzan walking around doing stuff, I wouldn't be receiving that as a teaching if I wasn't a Buddhist and he wasn't my teacher. Same with that first chapter in this book. If you pick this up as a non-Buddhist and you just read the story, it's just that's all it is. So there's something that we're doing as students, and I think of it as being a true student of making anything into not so much conceptually, but it's like receiving things in a way that maybe you're curious about how you're projecting on. So I might project that Sokuzan or anyone here is sad or happy or having difficulty or whatever my projection is. But I'm curious about, is that really where they're at? And then you can take it further. I could ask you, oh, are you sad today? And it doesn't even matter what you tell me. That doesn't make it true. You can tell me I am. Yeah, thank you for noticing. Maybe you're lying. I don't know. Or maybe you cover that up and you say, no, I'm fine. So there's like right there, completely empty. Like I'm projecting onto you, which is empty. You're not even telling me the truth. Because you can't, because we're both lying. Like my other talk.
What about, are you saying that it's not possible to perceive emptiness within others? Possible to perceive no self, or someone who sees that this is an illusion?
I don't know.
Of a vowing. I'm not familiar with like the symbolism of a seed syllable. I think you said something was like that. Could you just explain what that is for me?
Yeah. Sorry, that's a little bit of the, I guess, the tantric stuff. But I think it shows up in everyday life somehow too. I don't know if I can think of an example, but it's just when you're really, really familiar with something and you could just think of one aspect of it that, and then the whole thing comes to you. Like, I don't know if that happens in music. Uh, or maybe lyrics to a song, or but it tends to, that's just one way of thinking about a seed syllable. There's a lot more to it, but I just find that powerful that let's say there's a book that you find really profound and you read it over and over and over, you read it 100 times, so then someone could just say one part of that book, one sentence from that book, and the whole thing just kind of comes to you. It's like it is you, and it gets it's like you're creating a different kind of trigger almost. I don't know if that's true. That could be controversial, but some kind of positive trigger, maybe.
Or vowing. Sokuzan has a teaching, something like a good book, you can just read the title. Is it something like that? Is that a teaching in that area? Vowing.
I think seems like it seems similar. Although his like the part of that I like is you don't actually have to read the book. Whereas my version is you have to read it 100 times. So they're a little different, but
Sure. And one more. Earlier in that area where the whole sutra is in that first chapter, and the Buddha's not like saying any teachings, it kind of begs, it's not a good question, but it begs the question, like, are the teachings the kind of entertainment? Because we couldn't just receive him sitting down, or
yeah, that reminds me of how the Buddha teaches in so many different ways, or a Buddha. So that teaching, I feel like that particular teaching where he doesn't say anything is something maybe only Buddhas recognize. I could be wrong. Because then he held up a flower to another monk who understood what that meant. But then he teaches on all these different levels, and he'll take one teaching that someone has locked down on or basically become attached to and show how that isn't quite the case either. So that he talks about it in the Diamond Sutra that all teachings are a raft as well. So um, it could be said like entertainment, like using the illusion to point beyond the illusion. So I feel like entertainment might be actually a skillful means sometimes.
Sure, that was kind of my next question. As I asked, that entertainment is a little condescending. I'm just wondering if there's maybe a more open way of looking at that. It's not like, yeah, entertainment value.
Well, that word works for me. I think I string myself along the Buddhist path, entertaining myself. Like I'm really into this sutra right now, and I can't wait to go read it. Like after forms are done tonight, I'm gonna go to my room and continue reading it. It's so there's an inspiration, I guess. Maybe that's a loaded word too, but there's some kind of juice there. It's like you get, or like a good comedian. They set you up and they pull out the rug. So he keeps doing that in here. He's like the best comedian ever. Yoko.
Bowing in the way you brought up non-theism is anytime we're looking, like if I'm feeling terrible and I'm looking outside myself at some other that I want to give my attention to, is this looking for something like a theistic religion might offer?
It seems like it. It seems like that's the religious version of Savior, and then we have our everyday versions of Savior. And not to negate that, because there's such a, I think there's a lot of power in praying, supplicating, asking for help. We do that here. I think we attempt to do it non-theistically, with a sense of we're not separate from that which we're praying to kind of idea, or that is us. And yet, for me, a little bit, I think some theism definitely seeps in there.
Milk bowing, then what creeps up next for me is like some kind of savior separatism is trying to find the saviors for all the stuff that's showing up that I don't want or that I'm trying to preserve. Is there any way that you can think of that if you were looking for a savior that it might help besides, the relative situation?
Are you asking if there's a way that theism can help?
Yes.
Then we'd have to ask what does help mean, I guess. But I think yes. I mean, I don't know, but something about that intention or that yearning, it just can't say that that's wrong at all. And it's not even like comparing the two doesn't even really work. I think you can be the non-theism part is the Buddha could walk in here right now and you could totally miss it. He could be yelling in your face, which he probably has. So I have a little memory of that. and we still miss it. So it just always comes back to doing it here. And then as I say that, there's no one here. So what's going on there? And then you need some apparent other to point out things. So the whole thing I'm very confused right now talking about it. So, but I think that's good, that conceptually just getting all mixed up and you can't nail anything down. There's nowhere to reside.
Milka bowing, what is it that's mixed up in the Diamond Sutra that, yeah, what is it that gives you that feeling of being mixed up?
He uses a dialectic, they call it a dialectic. So the a tree is not a tree, therefore it is a tree. We'll do that with, if you do that with everything you can think of, based on kind of how they're doing it in the sutra, it makes sense in this other way that I can't really put into words. And that's what I was attempting to do by saying you need something to see to realize emptiness. If you don't have anything there, you can't say it's empty, which sounds opposite. That's why we knock on this, we make that sound, or we hit something really solid. That's telling me that it's empty, but I can't. Conceptually, that doesn't make sense to me, but there's something else where that makes sense. So then he goes into dharmas are not dharmas, therefore they are dharmas. But then there's another part where it's, I don't think I can even quote it. They're also not dharmas, so that they are no dharmas. Like he starts mixing up that language. Not quite like Dogen Zenji does, but somewhere in that neighborhood. So really messing with our assumptions and the things that the way we attach, I guess, is kind of, I feel like what it's one of the main things it's cutting through.
Milka bowing, when you were referencing the rug being pulled out from under, do you find that you want to not have that happen, kind of like have known something about that situation where the rug doesn't get pulled out from under you?
I guess that hasn't come up so much. Maybe because I really like comedians. But every time, and it's not always that formula that does it. There's other things in there I can't think of at the moment that you're just going along and then it's a setup and then they just point right through everything. And it's like that. You're just like, whoa. I mean, I have to shut the book sometimes. I just get like, but other times I'm just completely confused. So that's another way of the rug getting pulled out is I think I have it all. I think I'm following the logic and then I'm just not, left with a pile of concepts that don't connect. So I feel like that's another way of pointing out that you might assume that's wrong to be confused about what you're reading. But I feel like just having known Sokuzan for the last many years, one thing I've learned is that confusion is not a problem. Losing your train of thought is not a problem. Sometimes those are even closer to what's true.
Thank you.
Mondo.
Hondoban, can you read a couple of verses of the Diamond Sutra?
Sure. The famous first chapter. It's that much. So this is the whole Diamond Sutra is said to be in this first few paragraphs. Thus have I heard. Once the Bhagavan was dwelling near Shravasti at Anatapindata garden in Jeta forest, together with the full assembly of 1,250 bhikshus and a great many fearless bodhisattvas. One day before noon, the Bhagavan put on his patched robe and picked up his bowl and entered the capital of Shravasti for offerings. After begging for food in the city and eating his meal of rice, he returned from his daily round in the afternoon, put his robe and bowl away, washed his feet, and sat down on the appointed seat. After crossing his legs and adjusting his body, he turned his awareness to what was before him. A number of bhikshus then came up to where the Bhagavan was sitting. After touching their heads to his feet, they walked around him to the right 3 times and sat down to one side. Jashin.
Jishinbari. I'm wondering if you see any connection between that example of tree and which you gave us to demonstrate, to kind of present the core of Diamond Sutra. So any connection between this and the second tenet, which Sokuzan teaches? Bowing. If you remember, do you remember second tenet? If not, I just refresh my mind so I can.
Can you refresh my mind? I'm
I
very.
refreshed my mind because I didn't remember myself. Well, when you said the tree is okay, what you said? What did you say? Can you say again what you said about the tree?
It's hard to remember that one.
This is the tree.
How do you read the second tenet?
Can you read the second tenet?
Yeah. So you said something that the tree is not the tree, therefore it is the tree. This is what I remember. So when I was listening to you, I was wondering if there is a connection with second tenet, which is saying that it's empty of what we think. So we think the tree is the tree and it is empty of it, but the second tenet is saying, but it's full as it is. Would you see a connection between those two? Bowing.
There could be. I'm just not seeing it myself. I wondered about that too, and I haven't made that connection yet, if there is one. So it's a great question. I just don't have anything around it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Think, Elena?
Go to him first.
Shoto.
Total bowing. In this, and you brought up Dogen, how it can trigger confusion. How is the confusion in those books different than the confusion from like The Long Lightning, the book that you wrote that is pretty confusing?
Shoto is referring to a book I wrote 10 years ago. It's called The Long Lightning. It probably sounds like gibberish to most people, but it's basically playing with words and concepts and sounds for 144 pages. So if you're a true student, that you could learn from that. And I think you have actually. We've been writing back and forth off and on, and there's something about working with language in that way where I feel like we pull the rug out from each other. So I'm not saying it's at the level of Buddhism, but there's some kind of creativity there, I guess.
Show bowing. Is it something like the religious texts were actually willing to treat the confusion that way? And if, like, I'm understanding you to say we could have that with any other kind of confusion, and maybe the Dharma tech is like an entry into working with it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to frame it.
Thank you.
I don't know if that's true, but that's kind of how it's looking. Well, Elena?
Elena Bowing, I'm just thinking about contrast. It seems that the Diamond Sutra is referring to the idea that you need contrast in order to see that there's nothing there. And in that introduction, there didn't seem to be really any disturbance, any contrast, and I don't know, this is a roundabout way of exploring, but it reminded me of chalk would carry water. Like before enlightenment, chalk would carry water, and after enlightenment, chalk would carry water. And I was wondering if there was any sort of common thread between those things that you saw.
Yeah, I think that teaching is actually quoted in the Diamond Sutra commentary by Red Pine. One reason I love this particular translation is he brings in other teachers commenting on the Diamond Sutra, and some of those commentaries are just as profound, if not more so sometimes. So an ordinary spot like that, another teacher is commenting on it, and you just see it in a completely different way. But yeah, the mountains are mountains, and then they're not mountains, and then they're mountains again. Seems to line up with that same formula, as far as I can tell. Final question, Dodo.
I noticed something I do, with my friends or whomever. If they were confused about that, I might want to try to explain it and give them examples that would maybe take them away from that confusion, and wondering how, as a teacher, you work with when someone doesn't understand like what they're reading. Um,
Are you calling me a teacher?
I think so.
I guess it comes up in book study sometimes, or a few times in conversations we've had where I just stop talking about something that you brought up because I can see that you're looking at it directly for yourself, and I don't want to meddle with that. And it feels really good actually, in a sense where I didn't have to like jump in and tell you my take on what you're talking about because there's something, and maybe that's just our relationship. So I don't know that that carries over anywhere else necessarily, but I also in book study, especially during Dogen, when people are just like, what, how do we even ask questions about this? I just sitting there, I just feel like this is it. Like we cannot decipher what he's saying. We don't know how to talk about it. We don't even know what to ask Sokuzan about it. And that's like ego is just kind of suffocating. So that can be the painful part. But you're also just sitting there. There's no problem really.
What is it here, or in the person who wants to help someone else like cover up that confusion? Like I'm wanting someone else to understand. What is that about?
Uh, First, what comes up is I don't know, and after that comes up, it's their own insecurity. So we that's us over there, and we don't realize that, but we treat it like us, even though we don't have that realization. Like it's like we squirm because we can't stand someone else squirming, and not all the time, of course, but that's how I've seen my own kind of trying to explain things a little bit. Okay.
Elena Bowing, is that bringing us into a theistic savior complex?
Is what?
The,
Is what bringing us?
his question is like, why do we feel like we need to stop the confusion or help someone with their confusion?
Save them. Yeah, that's it.
And then is that bringing in like the theistic thing that we were talking about before?
Yeah, which leads to the self-righteous do-gooder helper identity, which we've seen a lot of, and there's still a lot of that here. So anytime, yeah, it's like, hey, what does he say? Trust someone's. We call it confusion, and it sounds condescending, but it's like trust whatever they're looking at, I guess. Okay.